Thank you. You're all very welcome this morning. It's great to see so many of you. Names of this door, I will library help research methods here in the Glucksman Library. And together with my colleague Patty, who is the Library of Arts, Humanity and Social Science Research Liaison, we're going to present to you on building capacity and wisdom for evidence synthesis. This will then be followed by a presentation from Dr. Sarah Dillon from Ballot Help, Dr. Elena Hearn from Department of Psychology, and they're going to present on the next generation of researchers to evidence synthesis. Please then have a discussion, and this will be chaired by Dr. Aoife Gallagher, School of Allied Health. So you have an opportunity to ask any questions that you might have. Okay, so building capacity and wisdom for evidence synthesis. So evidence synthesis is a global term that is being used increasingly to, I suppose, describe different types of reviews. So there's so many of them being produced now. There's integrative, scoping, qualitative evidence synthesis, just to name a few. And they're increasingly being used to inform healthcare public policy and interventions. And they follow strict methodologies. So in this context for our agenda, I'm going to present to you on challenges, the supports that we have in the library, and future actions. And Patty then will talk you through our experience. Okay, so just to begin with, because with this rise in production of evidence synthesis, it causes a lot of challenges for the researchers. And this can be in form of maybe not having awareness of the methodologies that are used to put the different review types that can be applied. And maybe understanding as well with process systematic that's taking a planned system approach. And it's also workflow based. And I suppose one of the key issues that we find through supporting is that planning around the research question is key and not a lot of time spent in here. And this might be around where there's confusion around or not understanding the vocabulary of the subject discipline, the language, and maybe just even spurred having some terms that can use that can test it on the database just to see what's out there and to pattern match across the literature. Also as well, really important is allowing enough time for different stages. So one of those might be developing the protocol. It's also around search strategies, which is really important. And there's a lack of awareness around this. There's a lot that needs to be got into starting nation searches, just kind of doing a lot of reading first, right through to the final stage. And it's an iterative process. As well, sometimes it's awareness around the supports that are there. So it's really important to know a project team. So on your project team, you might have different expertise, such as statistician or a librarian as well. And I suppose being aware of supports through the library and software that's out there and helps to build efficiencies to the process as well. And then really important here is knowing that you may need to allow time to develop different skills. And the one I point out here is searching skills, because there's a weak gap. And I suppose, as I mentioned, a lot of awareness around how important it is to be able to run robust, comprehensive searches, as that's what underpins the evidence synthesis at the end of the day. Okay. So there are also challenges for the librarian, of course. A lot of the time, it's about balancing the level of support, the type of support you can get with other duties. And more often than not, unfortunately, researchers need to come for support to a latent process. It might be where they need to track back to the research question if there is enough time put into that stage as well. And they need to really engage with the library senior. And it's about recognising the contribution of the librarian. So a lot of the time, it might be a consultation stage where the librarian might be advising around search terms just to help the research question. And they could be acknowledged in the paper for that. Or they could be a full co-author where they are involved as a research partner on the team. So again, they're advising you to start search terms, they're running search strategies, and they're also advising search domains. And it's having the experience as well to collaborate on too, or you might be supporting students with their work as well. So a lot of programs to study postgraduate level, students are required now to undertake some form of evidence synthesis. So that does put a lot of pressure on library services as well. And then trying to keep up to date with everything that's changing, current methodology, technology, and then having the opportunities which can difficult well to participate on a research team and get that experience yourself being on a team and different stages of the process. And I suppose something else that's really coming out as well is that the support is moving outside health sciences and to other disciplines. So a lot of the queries are more complex now. They're across disciplines and there's help element. So sometimes what you're doing is you're using guidelines, methodologies that are already established in health sciences to help outside of these subject areas as well. So here in the library, I suppose some of our structured library supports are for undergraduate level. We have workshops that are scheduled throughout the semester. And we have the library assignment toolkit on Whitespace or VLE here in university. For postgraduate, we have the research information toolkit on Brightspace, and a visual over here is the research information lifecycle, which is showcasing, I suppose, for highlighting the workflow approach. And this one spends 6 units in the toolkit as well. So we also have a LibGuide for evidence synthesis, and again, this contains long information and just further information on, guiding around the process and guidelines that are out there as well. So I suppose more for our practice-based library supports in 2024, we set up a service for evidence-based research, and this was streamlined supports for evidence synthesis. So some of the documentation that we produced were a service level charter, a help request form, which I'll speak to a little bit more in the next slides, and a search design template. So this is designed to send out to researchers who are looking for support specifically with their search terms to help each develop their searches. And sometimes then this can lead to a consultation, which again is a very important part of the process, is that relationship building is vital. So this, our service level charter, it's a 3-tiered level of support. So tier 1 is general guidance or building awareness around the process is met through online resources that we have. Tier 2 is consulting with the librarian. You're more trained, got a little bit more experience in the process. And this is where a help request form comes into play here as well. And tier 3 then is the librarian is the research partner. So that's where we're able to maybe, that always depends on the capacity that we're able to co-author on the budget. This is our help request form. So the first question is, what's the purpose of your query? And just the highlighted text shows primarily, what purpose is. So as part of a research team project, a thesis software research, or it's for final research, fluently research. Where you use the schematic workflow. So usually it is around search strategies. That's really where the gaps are. The language, where should I search? How many data should I search? Do you need to be looking at co-illustrator as well? And what type of evidence synthesis do you want to taking? So again, from earlier, we're asked the scoping, systematic literature review, morphology of evidence synthesis. So Borma helps us to engage and target sport and, to get requests and through the sport as well. So in terms of future actions, so at the moment we're developing a workflow for search methodology. So that means, generally for every review type, there's a series of steps that you follow to undertake the review. So the searching step is one step in that process. So we're trying to develop a methodology around that to break it down into a further series of sub-steps. You try and again to have to build the skills. We're also making sure that we embed search in skills for ADAM, the academic transformation operation modeling, and that's the objective of that. It's the revise of the model, and that's just to make sure searching skills are aligned with some competence frameworks such as ResearchComp as well. And we're also going to design maybe a separate unit on Brightspace, again around search methodology. And continue to try and build data efficiencies into the workflow. So that might be something as basic as using a spreadsheet to start building that bigger picture around search terms, or it might be using software like Competence to help you get to improved efficiency in workflow for your extracting your screening as well. And again, looking at AI obviously to see how that we can build in efficiencies through some AI tools as well. And we're also working on a one-page LibGuide for scoping review, because that is the review type that we get asked about mostly. And so it could mean then that our search methodology would feed into that as well. It's that step for building search skills would be replicated all across the review types that we create, but we'd only be doing maybe a LibGuide for 2 to 4 review types. So that's me, and as you know, it's called Chief Top Blur Experience. Thanks. Thank you.
Hello, welcome. And there's a library tab here from acquisitions because we buy books and we bought a few examples. Pretty much everything's available electronically. And Merca Film is here as well. She looks after the design of our educational support and materials. So Liz and I do not work in isolation. We have a whole group of folks working with us. So that's missing. What happens? We see the fear in the eyes of the student who comes to look for help. Okay. And they say, my supervisor says, this is what I make of it. Okay, it's rude. Most of all, they feel isolated. The collective process of systematic review needs to be communicated to them quite quickly. Okay. But what do we do? But you see, we have colleagues here, right? It's not a small slide. Lots of big words in there. Yes, you will win at Squat That Scrabble. The most important thing coming to us now with artificial intelligence is the quality auditing process and the sequence. We have implementation science, framework driven. We have evidence synthesis, audit driven. It's got to be right. It's got, whether it's data or information from journals. It's the what work side of the business, okay? And we're asked to do all of these things. I put in the last one because the psychology of research and well-being, we have people exhausting themselves doing evidence synthesis. We have people getting very tired because of decisions that they made. It's got to stop. The health of a researcher is vital, and the good practice for their future is absolutely important, okay? So there's a lot of systems knowledge coming in here. And no, they can't take shortcuts, you know? They try. They discover. EndNote takes a lot of the learning, right? When researching, you're all familiar with these workflows, checklists, frameworks, timing, auditing. They don't get that in their university basic degree, you know. So some of that's going to have to get in, you know, to what we do. Cognitive loading, I don't think there's a single person who has ever embarked on an evidence synthesis that doesn't suffer from, oh my God, there is too much, right? Okay. The rule-based is like they have a research imagination which is personal and expressive, and they crash straight into evidence synthesis, which is rule-based and structured. Ouch, you know. None of this is to blame anyone. But poor vocabulary, terminology, and search terms, the second one there is absolutely vital. And with AI and how AI is used, we're going to have to see research groups devising vocabularies. Now, EPPI in London, when they started out, because they were servicing UK education, they actually built 10,000 line spreadsheets of vocabularies and applied the numbers to verify the correctness of the use of those words. Okay. Most of us are kind of flying by the seat of our pants, so building an expert level vocabulary is a step too far. However, if you're looking at academic AI and where it might go, your expert level vocabulary suddenly is the engine that informs the engine. Okay, so that might become a really important step. Okay, and anybody joining your research team then is confronted with that vocabulary. This is how we talk and think, and I don't just mean a corpus. I mean the actual references that support the use of that terminology. Right? Yeah, poor time management. Guess who suffers? Right? Say. This real research at the synthesis side, slice and dice, they put tons of effort into searching, they put tons of effort into learning co-evidence, and then they've got to make sense because we're sitting full square and central in the zone of knowing, in the zone of understanding, and the zone of sense making. Okay, this is where evidence synthesis belongs, right? So that's slice and dice days, right? And they stagger into it without having done any practices. So there's a problem there. Weak decision-making, mostly due to exhaustion and way too much information, okay? And the lack of knowledge of being systematic, auditable steps. Atul Gawande invented the medical checklist. It's still sensible, and the knowledge of systematic is going to come back to checklists so that when we come to examine a piece of work, we'll actually be able to see what a student did at what a time, and be forensic about the AI involvement. Okay, so auditability has to come in to what we do. Okay, right? No, scoping. Right, this is a cheat. Right, Google Scholar. I've used it for years because I don't want to do really. So going to Google Scholar, you can search in the titles only or in the text only. So Google Scholar has its own search language, right? And you can see very, very quickly an epidemiology of what the information is. You will still have to go back to square one and search the databases because the databases are auditable and Google Scholar isn't. But my goodness, it works, you know? So I can see very quickly that there's 420 articles in a big, broad subject area, of which maybe 150 are going to be read. So 150 articles by 10,000 words per article by 2 researchers. Thanks very much. See you next Christmas. Right. Overall, is so Helen Little, we have her book over there, so we've got a few tangible objects with us, right? Again, she kind of summarizes pretty much that. Campbell, so we have Cochrane on the medical side, which is relatively easy because medical has such a strong language base, and we have Campbell on the public policy and education side. And it's absolutely vital now in education because everything I say about the words and all the rest of it is also going to go into the educational stats and the structures and what we tell ourselves about what we count as well. And I can't do data, right? So there's a rake of material in there. Work through each review title sequence because you're going to be facing into a lifetime as researchers, right? So somebody's going to surface and say, hey, I want to do an integrative review. Well, there's a whole new set to learn. And we have Trish Greenhouse, How to Read a Paper. Mm-hmm. Trish, during COVID, used she's professor of general practice in Oxford. She used her network of doctors to tweet into her the symptoms that they were getting, etc., and then did rapid reviews for the UK government of using using Infigo's capacity to handle Twitter. Oh my God, yeah, okay, right. No, you're reviewing all the time. Okay, when you're standing in the supermarket and looking at movies, you're reviewing. Value those skills. Like, be a bit forensic about what you actually do every day. We have our toolkits. Thank you very much, Mags. There's a course here that I did at the very end of COVID. It runs out through Carnegie Mellon University, right? So they'll bring the meta-analysis in. That's the bit I had to stop because I can't do numbers, right? So a really handy one there. Now, evidence synthesis are in charge and Cochrane in charge, but the open science end of Cochrane is Cochrane Proud. Liz and I did that, and she passed and I think. Okay. Now, we have here the researcher development framework, so and pass that out to folks to have a look, because no doubt we are going to have to put all of these skill sets into this framework for the purpose of Atom, because we've got to get students working on each one of those steps as they go through college, so that this evidence synthesis becomes normal, because in the AI world, we have got to know where their information and their evidence is coming from. Who's next?
I think it's the next time, right?
Wonderful. So thank you so much, Liz and Patty. I have the pleasure now following on with the talk order, but I'm Dr. Hager. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Psychology. I worked quite a bit with evidence synthesis. I suppose an area that I'm really interested in is building capacity for the next generation. Myself and my colleague, Dr. Sarah Dillon, as well, I've worked in that space. We both work with Evidence Synthesis Ireland as Evidence Synthesis Ireland fellows. For anyone interested in building capacity in evidence synthesis, I would say have a look at Evidence Synthesis Ireland's page. They offer fantastic fellowships that both Sarah and I have benefited from. I actually now continue working with Evidence Synthesis Ireland as research associate. So I'm that person now that trains others. So I've seen, I suppose, an opportunity and a pathway which has very much benefited me. And I suppose that's also why I'm so passionate about it myself, because I would have started off evidence synthesis as a student. I probably would have been that person coming to both Liz and Patty saying, with just fear in the eyes, don't know what they're doing. So it's really a blessing to look back and be like, okay, there is sort of a way through it. And there are resources out there and supports out there as well. So as I mentioned, I came up through evidence synthesis as a fellow. That was really my first formal training that I would have had, and absolutely benefited from it. And it opened so many doors for me. And actually, as hard in my fellowship, I was placed in Campbell collaboration. So it was up there at Queen's University at the time. And I got exposure doing Cochrane reviews. So anyone familiar with the evidence synthesis race, Cochrane reviews are the ones that you look at and you're kind of thinking, oof, there's a lot to it. There's a lot of paperwork, a lot of checklists and so on. Very, very rigorous though. So again, I had an opportunity there to learn from the absolute best. And since then, I myself have worked in the space of evidence synthesis. I've also had the pleasure of working with colleagues, seeing students come up and training them in evidence synthesis as well. And just having collaborations of working with practicing policymakers also. Like I remember during the time of COVID, I used to joke because I'd say, evidence synthesis is COVID proof. It's okay. It's okay. Like I could continue on and was fortunate to be able to continue on with my research. But again, at that time, I was working with the Department of Health. We're working on projects looking at how can we increase the likelihood of vaccine uptake. So we're doing reviews of that. So definitely evidence synthesis opened doors for me. And as I said, I've benefited from a lot of the trainings that are out there. And now other opportunities that I'm involved in as well with Sarah. I'm actually be sit on the Cochrane Methods Co-Production Group. And Sarah will talk about that a little bit later as well, about I suppose the future capacity building in evidence synthesis and sort of building in the PPI piece as well. But I suppose to start this off, I remember when I first saw this figure, and at first I was thinking, this is great, right? HD systematic reviews published a day. It's an up-and-coming area of research, people are interested in it. But then when I actually thought about it, is it a good thing that there are 80 systematic reviews being published on average a day? This is just in the field of epidemiology, okay? Also, these figures are coming from 2019. So as I said, COVID times, I used to say COVID proof, you could still continue on with evidence synthesis because you're working with the existing evidence. So I can only imagine that has gone up since, okay? It's good in the way that there's increasing understanding for a method, but I kind of caveat that quite heavily. And what I mean by that is that, okay, just because the number of evidence synthesis being produced are increasing year on year, doesn't mean the methods or the quality is increasing, okay? So we're kind of seeing ourselves in a space now where there's possibly a skills gap in that, yes, there's a lot being produced, but in actual fact, is the methodological quality there, okay? Second piece then is obviously the varying quality that comes with that. So it ultimately, when you talk about evidence synthesis, what we want evidence synthesis to do is inform practice and policy. So it's the hierarchy of that evidence-based practice. So policymakers and people working in practice are looking at evidence synthesis to inform what intervention do I select. Okay, so quality is so important. So just because there's more systematic reviews doesn't mean there's more evidence to use, okay? And then finally as well, it's this bottleneck. And I like this analogy because I think it perfectly captures a scenario that we could possibly be creeping into with evidence synthesis. And that is that there's a plethora of evidence being produced year on year, but then you've got the narrow neck of the bottle. What is usable from that? Okay, so it comes back to this quality piece. Not all systematic reviews that are being published are of the necessary quality to actually be able to inform practice and policy. So in terms of the ecosystem of evidence synthesis, so ultimately when we start off with evidence synthesis, it should be informed by some question and practice, okay? So whether it's for the practicing physician thinking, which intervention should I recommend? You go to the evidence. It's the absolute cornerstone of evidence-based practice. What that means with it, though, is that we have researchers who have the capacity to do evidence synthesis. Because if people are asking these questions, which intervention, what's more efficacious, and what's the best predictor of outcomes, we need to be able to synthesize that from the existing research that's there. Okay, so we need people on the ground, researchers that have the capacity and the knowledge to do that. Not just people doing it because they think, oh, I'll be told it's a good structure for the PhD, I'll do an evidence synthesis project. Okay, so it's actually building up those skill sets and capacity for that. And then ultimately that evidence informing practice and policy. So it's this full cycle in the optimal sense. This is what we want to be seeing. But Patty and Liz spoke to this earlier. When you are doing evidence synthesis projects, they are very time sensitive, okay? So I would have just showed you 8 systematic reviews on average are published today. That's not empirical evidence, okay? So if anyone's ever undertaken database search strategies, you probably ran your search on a given day. If you ever go back and rerun that search down the line, you're like, why are the numbers different? Sometimes grossly different as well. So it is really time sensitive. Like I've been involved in evidence synthesis where, We might start it 2 years ago. We're getting to the point of manuscript publication now and trying to submit it. And the last thing we have to do before we actually get that manuscript in is update the searches. And for anyone who's been involved in evidence synthesis, you know that means you're essentially going back to the starting point, gathering the evidence again, sifting through the evidence for selecting your studies and figuring out, oh, I've got another 10 studies I have to include in my meta-analysis. I'll run it all again, okay? So it is very time sensitive, okay? You have to be able to keep abreast with the literature. And with that, there is an onus to need to update searches down the line as well. So once you set out on a project, being able to finish it in a timely time frame is kind of paramount and should be prioritized. It's also resource intensive, okay? A lot of hands on deck, particularly if you need to go back and update the database searches. So you actually have to have a core team of people who might be available for 1 to 2 any given years, okay? That can be hard to maintain, to sustain that momentum. And also, of course, when quality is imperative, there are no shortcuts, as Patty and Liz kind of would have mentioned as well. It's kind of keeping to those best practices. There's a lot involved, okay? So even though the schematic diagram is very, I suppose, nice and simple to understand, the actual realities of trying to implement that can be difficult. So I suppose for us and why we're so interested in evidence synthesis and building capacity, and in particular, I've worked a lot with early career researchers and students around this. And I suppose the reason my interest has come from it is because as an academic, I have a dual role of both research as well as teaching and lecturing in this university. And I have seen opportunities where we can actually use evidence synthesis skills within curricular settings, okay? And the figure that we have evidence synthesis in the middle. But what we mean by evidence synthesis is that I think everyone probably here in this room thinks of evidence synthesis as a method. It is your research method that you're doing to collect your data, okay? But in actual fact, evidence synthesis is also a vehicle for transferable skill development. And what I mean by that is that, yes, evidence synthesis is a method, you can get a publication out of it, but the skills of evidence synthesis are being able to critically read evidence. It's being able to weigh up conflicting literature and make recommendations from that. So in actual fact, it's skills that we're hoping to hone and develop and nurture at our students as well. And in the Department of Psychology, myself and my colleagues who recently wrote a chapter talking about actually the examples that we have used throughout our curriculum in psychology, how we've tried to build those evidence synthesis skills within a curricular session, like through assessment, where I could asking students to read the evidence and make recommendations, okay? So in actual fact, in terms of trying to build the capacity, we're trying to start as early as possible, and we're trying to do that via embedding it in the curriculum. So although evidence synthesis is highly complex, it's a very advanced skill set, there are actually opportunities that you can introduce it very early. And then hopefully try and nurture these skill set developments throughout a researcher's career. So student early career researchers can become involved and it's kind of building this capacity for long-term impact. And that's really where I suppose I have a particular interest, and I know Dr. Sarah Denton does also. So as I would have mentioned, in terms of the ecosystem, particularly for student involvement now, and the reason I want to hone in on student involvement for a little bit is because of some funded research that we did. I'm really interested in seeing, well, can we bring students onto existing review projects with people who have experience in evidence synthesis and see, well, how do they perform? Do they like it? Do they not like it? Are they, at the end of it, thinking, I'm never going to touch that again? So that's what we were interested in. So I suppose in terms of the landscape, it's curricular involvement and that extracurricular involvement. So curricular involvement, as I would have said, we have examples in psychology of where we try and build those evidence synthesis skills within the curriculum through, say, for example, assessment work. I also know in the School of Allied Health, they've got fantastic models actually with capstone research projects where students do evidence synthesis work and they're paired up to it. So they have the opportunity to go through the best methods of dual screening, dual data extraction. But we also have examples, say, within EHS, the Educational Health Sciences, where students actually do systematic reviews and meta-analysis for their master's research projects or their final year projects as well. In terms of the extracurricular involvement, this is also an area of, I suppose, growing interest. We have a lot of students that come to us saying, I want to get research experience. How do I do this? Okay, and in psychology, we've got one model. It's known as VIPER, Voluntary Internships in Psychological Research. And through that, sometimes we advertise projects, like evidence synthesis projects, where these students can actually join on to these existing reviews, and they can learn via shadowing and mentorship. So kind of really getting hands-on experience in an ongoing research environment and learning on the job. We also have the more trainingship ones available, such as the internships, the HRV summer scholarships, for example. We recently had a student who was successful in getting a HRV summer scholarship, and they're actually going to be joining our team now over the summer. They're going to be working on an evidence synthesis project that we currently have kind of proposed within our review team, and we have necessary expertise within our review team as well, so that the student can learn and shadow and be mentored within our existing team. So some of the funded work that we've done on this, so we got some money, but very lucky and fortunate to I suppose, get an award from Evidence Synthesis Ireland that was looking at study within a reviews. It was known as SWIRE, so study within a review scheme. And as part of this, they would have said, I'm really interested in seeing how we can bring students on projects and try and build their capacity. So we did a very small scale pilot trial where we took one of our existing reviews and we used Covenant. So for anyone not familiar, Covenant is a systematic review software. So it's each of the records that are identified from your database searches. You can look through them on Covenant, you can upload them, go through them, and you can screen them. What screening means is you make decisions, include or exclude. Does it meet my criteria from a review question? Yes or no, okay? So we had a sample of about 200 odd records, and we would have given them to these students. So these students have no prior experience in evidence synthesis. So it is their first touching point of contact. And we asked them to do the study selection task on Covenants. And what they didn't know is that they were reviewer 2 or screener 2. So what that meant was there's an existing member of our review team who had already screened these studies and made a decision not include or exclude. The student then came on board as the second screener to see how well they performed in terms of reliability for decisions that were already kind of made within the review team with various levels of expertise, from, I suppose, high-level expertise in both the content area and the method, and also say more novice team members as well, who had less than 1 year experience in evidence synthesis. And, a spoiler, I suppose, students actually did quite well. So these are students that had no prior experience and joined our existing team. And we gave them very minimal training. And the reason we gave them very minimal training in the first instance was because we wanted to see, well, how would they get on anyways? So we wanted to, depending on the results that we got, we'd see, okay, maybe we need to kind of see if we can further build sort of training materials for these students. But in actual fact, they outperformed what we even thought they might be able to achieve. So, sorry, you can see the training conditions in A, B, C, D. I won't go into it for the purposes of this talk, but if anyone's interested, feel free to follow up with me on it. They're essentially different arms of our trial. But overall, I just want to highlight, so you'd see if they're in the top line. So 82.07%, that was the reliability of these students with members of our review team, okay? So that means that of, all the records that were screened, 82.07%, there was agreement across them, okay? These are students, so as I said, no prior experience. We just gave them our inclusion-exclusion criteria, a brief overview of what the project is, and some very basic information about this is what an evidence synthesis is, this is what a systematic review is, this is what it means to screen studies, okay? So very much entry level. And across them, it ranged from about 52 to 95%. So actually, students were performing above what you'd expect by chance. And some of them exceptionally well, like 95% agreement with expert reviewers on that topic area. So we also asked the students afterwards, it's like, okay, well, hoping now, did they learn anything? Was there anything beneficial that they found from it? Because from our perspective as researchers, like, this is great. It means that there are actually opportunities that we can bring students on board our existing projects and so they perform exceptionally well. So it's a winning situation for everyone in this case. And students also had the win because they reported knowledge gains, wealth, skill development. So being involved in evidence synthesis research is valuable to my skill development. So everyone agreed, sort of an average there of 4.8 out of 5. And my knowledge of evidence has improved as a result of participation as well. So they're also learning on it. Okay, so the take homes then. So in this situation, we're seeing obviously increasing appetite from students to build the necessary research skills. We also see in the research landscape, there is increasing interest in evidence synthesis. A lot of evidence synthesis are being produced, but there is a question mark over the quality. So maybe a viable model is that actually we give up existing review teams can sort of open up spaces for these novice students or early career researchers to come on board, learn and shadow. And actually the results seem to be very favourable, as I would have said. And in the grander ecosystem and I suppose the landscape, as I was saying, time sensitivity, resource sensitivity, and also quality. these all seem to be coming together to actually work quite well. So this is a model that, we'd hopefully be able to continue with going forward and continue researching as well to see if the necessary benefits are there for the early career researchers and the students in terms of skill development and knowledge acquisition. So that's it for me. So a little hand over to my colleague, Sarah Dillon.
Thanks so much, Lane. So the site we've ended up we wanted to look at was looking into a mixed method study to get some more insight into qualitative feedback from students, early career researchers who had taken part in evidence synthesis. And in many cases, these students were leading on their own evidence synthesis projects as part of, say, the PhD studies. And again, good news, 80% enjoyed their involvement, 90% agreed that they had confidence to pursue another evidence synthesis. And I suppose then when you dove down deeper into qualitative results, what I really wanted to speak about today was kind of the hurdles that we came across that students were mentioning. And we thought that might be particularly appropriate for here today for building capacity. As staff members, we want students to have good experiences with evidence synthesis. Especially many of us are working with future clinicians or currently practicing clinicians. They're the people who can implement our findings. They're the people who need to be able to interpret research. And they're also our future collaborators. So we want them to have good experiences from the get-go. And typically, evidence synthesis is a foundational start to their research journey. So I suppose one of the things that we came across was the inherent complexity of evidence synthesis. If anyone has done an evidence synthesis before, as Liz, Patty, Elaine mentioned, in that doing the actual search strategy is one of the key cornerstones of a good evidence synthesis. But many students found that things like mesh terms confused them, coming up with the search string was particularly difficult for them, and even using tools like your Confidence, like your Rayan, was quite challenging for them. Secondly, we found that students were mentioning that there was a roadblock of support. So they found that they were particularly reliant on their supervisors. So many students noted that, say, if their supervisor was away, was ill, was on leave, that they were at a stopping point. They couldn't progress from there. And they weren't always aware of the external supports that might be available to them. So that was something that was, I suppose, we can all see particularly promising things that we could bring to that area to help students with this. So students did find that this was a big stumbling block, reliance on supervising. So I suppose even when we think about evidence synthesis, it is a great method because it is, again, a low barrier to entry. It can be sometimes, COVID or pandemic proof in ways. And it is something that we have institutional access to supports, like we have a license for Confidence at the moment. We have incredible resources in the library, and there's a low need for things like, lab space. And so students can do this, or early career researchers can do this free at any place and any time. So it can be a nice kind of self-paced project. But on the flip side of that, there is a deep level of knowledge required for evidence synthesis to get, high quality evidence synthesis out there, which we know is really, really crucial because, again, many of us are informing, health policies, health practices, health guidelines, how people are actually enacting evidence-based practice. And there is a high level of manpower as well with this. And even screening alone can be such a number of weeks or months even, or developing that initial protocol. And students do need to kind of be aware of that from the get-go coming into this, as well as that time sensitivity. So we know that some journals would say a review is out of date if the search hasn't been done in the past 6 months, the past year. I've seen even 3 months. So it is something that there are pressures in terms of trying to produce that within a time frame with the high quality. So I suppose in order to kind of balance that double-edged sword, we need to harness our internal and our external expertise. And we do have many pockets of expertise, in this university alone and also externally, that I think we need to bridge together. So I suppose when we were thinking about today and we were thinking about what kind of tangible take-home could you come away with as, some knowledge of where to point your students to and what actual resources do we have here in Web, we thought we might present it with this kind of diagram. So looking at the different scaffolds that are available to students, academics, or for researchers like ourselves, and at an international, national, and local level. So at an international level, we have many, many guidances from things like Prisma, GIN, JBI, who focus primarily on spoken reviews. We've got Cochrane again, who deal a lot with systematic reviews, but other types of evidence synthesis as well.
And we have incredible resources of, external courses like that with Carnegie Mellon, which I know Patty's done herself. And then in terms of our national landscape, again, we would really, really encourage you to point to Evidence Synthesis Ireland. Like, we've both learned so much in Evidence Synthesis Ireland. I think Patty and Nace have probably had dealings with them in the past as well. And they are such a good support to have. They're based in the University of Galway. They really, really are interested in building capacity across the national landscape. And they offer so many training courses for all levels, whether it's someone who's starting at the basics or someone who's really in that advanced stage. And I know in UL we even have like trainers who are working here with Evidence Synthesis Ireland. And then if we look at a local level, we've obviously got our expertise here in UL. So we have many people who are working on evidence synthesis and producing really high quality evidence synthesis that we can lean on to support, ask questions from. And we've also got obviously our colleagues in the library who have their research support network and all of the incredible infrastructure on Brightspace. Our Health Research Institute here in UL as well. I know many researchers collaborated on meta-analysis, receiving statistical supports from the HRI. And then again, that peer support. We can really harness that. So like Elaine mentioned, in the School of Allied Health will often actually pair students for reviews. And that can be really helpful. The students can learn to bounce off each other. But even if they're not doing the same review, we can have students, acting as co-authors in terms of screening, going through that process together, which can be a nice kind of un-isolating experience, I suppose, building that community. And I suppose looking at this, you can see there's so many touch points just beyond the supervisor. We obviously want the supervisors to have expertise, and many people around UL do, but we also want to point to those external supports so that we can take kind of the real burden off the supervisors as well. And when we were thinking then about, building the next generation, we do need to be looking forward and, what's coming down the line. And I suppose evidence synthesis is not a static method. It is something that is dynamic, is constantly evolving. And Elaine had mentioned that her and I are part of the Cochrane Methods Co-Production Group. And essentially, I know all of you would be aware of PPI, public and patient involvement in research. But that concept actually applies to evidence synthesis work as well. And we're moving into the space where we should be actually asking the public their opinions of what we're researching in terms of evidence synthesis. So we sit on this group, and what is coming down the line is that PPI will be embedded in evidence synthesis, particularly those high-level Cochrane reviews will expect them. And the Cochrane handbook is looking like it will include PPI right around all of the chapters. So it is something that we need to be mindful of. But again, it speaks to the need to have those, external touch points, to actually have our fingers on the pulse in terms of what's happening, what's developing in this space. And as we look forward, that's something that we're hoping to develop here in UL. I know 4 of us have had big discussions about potentially harnessing some sort of community of researchers who are interested in evidence synthesis. So I suppose it is a bit about watch this space. We don't know what it'll look like yet, but it is something that we think will help support this really fantastic research method. So thank you so much for listening today.
Hi everyone, I'm Aoife. I'm from the School of Allied Health, and I'm delighted to be asked actually to chair the panel today. Given my appalling time management skills, I do not know why they have asked me. I'm going to do my super best not to let anyone down. It's great to get this conversation going. We all have the scars, of the poorly planned systematic review. And when I was doing my PhD, I remember a moment with Katie Robinson, actually, who's here in the second row, telling Katie that I had 91 documents in my integrative review, and watching her face was interesting. It's a bit like being on a plane where there was turbulence and you're desperately looking at the air stewards to know what's really happening, and the face told you everything. So I've been there, and I also supervise students, and I see their faces as my face was then. So it's wonderful to hear all of this amazing work and the practical toolkits that you're developing, and the capacity buddy as well. So thank you for inviting me to chair. It was an absolute pleasure. So we've got about 20 minutes, I think, for questions from the audience. And I'm here to help facilitate that. It might be helpful just to say who you are before you ask your question, just so that people know where you're at, maybe the department you come from as well. And on that note, Katie, excellent.
Thanks, Eva. And thanks to all the panelists. Great presentations. And you know what? I'm kind of going to ask you a question of an audience member, which is unusual, but so many of you mentioned Evidence Synthesis Ireland, and I didn't know what Evidence Synthesis Ireland was a couple of years ago. And I just found their training and resources just phenomenal, particularly for PhD students. And I know that Pauline is our UL lead for ESI. And I wonder, would you like to? That's available. But actually, I don't say your slide. You said that they charge fees, and they do for some of the training.
For some of the training.
But they are tons
It's
of
actually minimum. And we only introduce fees to stop people booking and not turning. So literally it's 15 or 20 euros for most students, because we're not doing it to generate income, we're doing it to generate commitment to people that do actually come. I'm Colin Mescalan, actually the Professor of Research in the School of Nursing and Midwifery. I'm part of the Executive of Evidence Synthesis Ireland, and I co-lead the QES National app. So I suppose like we've just been funded for the third, in December for the third season. So we've just got over 6 million for the next 5 years. So we have huge plans in terms of, and linking to what you're saying, Patty, there is big focus on AI and how so we actually have an additional arm now that we're going to use for AI. And that was one of the calls from the HRB, requiring about it when we went for, select. So it's like what you're saying, it's future proof of the whole thing, linking with the searching and how to teach people to use it in an appropriate way to, have better, synthesis pieces. As I say, I'm on the qualitative evidence synthesis arm, and we've huge plans for, and it's all about building capacity and that. And I just think it's a great resource, really. And we also Sarah and Elaine were fellows. So again, that's something that's going to be, promoted and that. And we're also looking at people that want to see themselves as teaching. So to come on as, say, faculty teaching and the thing. So all of those opportunities are there. And all of the training is up there on webinars and everything. So it's a really great resource, for anyone. And as Sarah and Elaine have said, being a fellow, as part of so you get to co-author with you with a fantastic team. So they come out 3 or 4 times a year, and that's going to continue because it's been incredibly successful. I think in the lifetime of DSI, there's over, I think we're nearly up on 100 fellows at the moment, sort of. So it's anyway, I don't want to just keep telling.
And Paul, you're going.
How do they get involved? Is it just a case of going to the website and getting onto a mailing list and all of that side of things?
We're just in the process of revising the website. Okay. So there's actually going to be separate tiles, and you click into I'm new to it. I have a bit of expertise. So it'll take you in the next maybe 2 months. So we're literally, we have an exec meeting this Wednesday, and we're looking at the new, so we'd be promoting all those things. So I'd say keep an eye on the website, and
Thanks for proposing.
and if ever anyone, as I say, I'm in nursing and midwifery, so if ever anyone wanted, and I'd really be interested in talking to you, just sort of say.
Sorry, Casey, God, you took the words out of my mouth there, because when you mentioned the shared community of practice, I was sort of thinking, given Pauline your connections and access to ESI and the funding, if there were local training needs that were identified here in Limerick that we felt this will be a particular, this is a training need amongst the library staff or amongst PhD students or amongst PhD supervisors, is there a bit of there's our flexibility around
There is something to build in budget about, and that's what we do. We meet regularly and, feed into that sort of thing. So absolutely there would be. Yeah.
So it's a real strength here that we have such good collaboration colleagues across.
In our conversation as a group, the implementation science now has CIRCUL, the group in humanities, with Laura Keys in charge. So there's a focus on a skill set that actually depends on evidence synthesis and symptomatic review to make their decisions and do their work. Okay, so a recognition. Chris McInerney at Humanities is Director of Skills. My personal view is that this method is so important that there has to be a similar structure to demonstrate leadership, right? And to get it into the curriculum so that every UL graduate is graduating with an evidence process inside their curriculum, right? Remember, this begins with computing, because the computer engineers had to identify what problem were they trying to solve in their software. Right, starts there, so it's absolutely pervasive across every single one of our faculties.
So you think college should set up a research centre? Is it?
We have to fix it so for everybody. All it's one funny thing.
Yes.
Is Cochrane in the collaboration with Campbell, we're in the process of doing some modules around all of the various, and they're going to be free to it. So they'd be a fantastic.
Then it is about the dissemination and the implementation.
So the threshold, so everybody can get in. Yeah, results.
And actually, searching is identified as one of the real Achilles areas of FICO. So there's modules going on development at the moment on that. So I think that'd be really helpful.
Yeah. We have another question.
Yeah, so Alan Donnelly, Director of the HRI, and I think I'm meeting with some of you later at some stage to talk about the development of this area. I think it's, the talks today were excellent. It's definitely something that talking as a PhD supervisor, the PhD student comes and asks you a question, go to the library or go somewhere else, find out. And I think it is good to have those resources. But coming to the question I was thinking of, I've been involved in trying to set up doctoral networks. I have European doctoral network students come here to be trained. One of the things we lack is actually ECTS credited modules on campus in kind of generic doctoral skills. And evidence synthesis would be a very obvious one to have a nice module that our own PhD students could take, and students coming in from, those doctoral networks. Is there one?
Meta-analysis as well. And
And meta-analysis.
Statistics side, the stuff I can't go to. Absolutely vital.
Is there one in existence? Is there any plan to have one?
I can speak a bit about that as an ASM research services in the library, and there are some, and I think you're aware, the doctoral fellows does run generic transferable skills courses, and there is one, but it only touches.
It's on the summer school, and it's 3 credits. Yeah,
and it's not just that; it's finding information and publication. So it's a very high school part, and we really bring it up, but we consider it to be taught at graduate level, and that we know that generally dealing people who are not doing NCC, they're just doing a regular literature review and need to know research systematically. So there's definitely a gap in the market around a more specific, focused modular skills for MSc, for which certainly is a part from that.
Yeah. I know as well, say in the Department of Psychology, we have a level 10 program. So it's a doctorate, which is taught. So it's the doctorate in clinical psychology. And as part of that, the students, when they're doing their dissertations, so their PhD dissertations, one of their chapters is always evidence synthesis. So I know within our department, we've spoken about trying to develop an evidence synthesis micro-credential that we could offer to our students, but also open up more broadly. So it is, I know conversations have been happening. I don't think anything is yet available. But I completely agree. I think it's a space that it's definitely growing in interest, and the emphasis should be on ensuring that people have the necessary skills to produce high quality work. Because there have been many examples that I've seen, even of published literature, and I'm thinking, how did this get published? Yes, and it's a little bit frustrating then for people who do work in this space, because the amount of time, energy, and resources that goes into producing an evidence synthesis, like you're talking like years, I think, in my experience, and also, of course, depending on the size of it, of the project in and of itself. But I do think that having more people who have the skills to properly conduct evidence synthesis will make opportunities for further collaborations easier, and the overall quality of evidence and, I suppose, our ability to inform practice will also be elevated because of that. So I do think it's definitely a gap in the market. I know Evidence Synthesis Ireland, actually through the University of Galway. They have a master's program, I believe, and it's really, really foundational that their skills in evidence synthesis builds up as part of that master's program.
I definitely UCC have. I did one as part of my PhD on SPHERE program. They definitely have one. It's been running a while.
And Zir works also with College of Surgeons.
Yes.
Yeah.
Also,
So that's
yeah.
it's a really interesting group.
Yeah. So you might somehow need to link in more there.
Yeah. How far it can go, University of England has 6 evidence synthesis PhD, structured PhD. So over the course of your studies, you effectively learn absolutely every research type of England. You'd specialise in the sciences and ag science and food and nutrition when the Dutch rearranged they got that share. So the graduate comes out, they're perfectly trained for all the international organizations, for all the food security and futures work. They are absolutely versatile. It's quite remarkable. So it's more than just I do want to have the experience,
Yeah.
But I did a lot of work a good few years ago now, on how was it used in the EU. So it wasn't at that stage used in the EU at all. They gave the paper to the Nordic Law Libraries in Iceland, a very nice conference. Where it was used with people who were evaluating the value for money of the EU research that was done. Okay, they all used evidence synthesis method. And I handed my PowerPoint over to the librarian in charge of the Commission Library, who handed it straight on to the DG for Economics and wasted no time. They had trainers in the next 8 weeks. It just caught the moment, right? So we're catching a moment here now.
Yeah.
Needs to. Yeah.
Might just go back to what Janet said there about the module. So I had him speak more to searching skills, and I think so that module would need to be kind of maybe a series of levels, beginner and undergraduate level upwards, because students have enough to contend when they get to postgraduate level as well, without having to try and learn how to actually search effectively. So I think that's really, really key.
Yeah, and that's what was coming up in our qualitative work as well. Students were saying they wanted it built in early year, and they didn't want it just as part of the postgraduate. They actually wanted it as part of the undergraduate. Obviously, there's a lot of technical difficulties with that, especially with credited courses. But it is something you could think about and maybe move towards. Aoife, if I can, could I actually ask Nanzini? So sorry, Nanzini Mohan, she's a PhD student in the Department of Psychology. Nanzini's had experience in evidence synthesis for her master's, and she's now doing it as part of her PhD. But actually just be curious to hear your take on it, Nanzini, in terms of, say, your student experience, but also would you have benefited from, or would you have liked to have had, say, formal training opportunities earlier on?
I'd say definitely yes, because taking it up just as a master's research project, it's not enough time to go through everything alongside the modules you're already doing. So it gives a bit of pressure. But if you essentially know how to run the searches and all of those kind of things, it would come in handy earlier on. I was very happy that I had Elaine, and she kind of worked in similar area, and I could get a little bit of help developing the searches. She had an idea of what the term should look like. But if, I suppose, the supervisor in any case hasn't worked in the similar enough area, it wouldn't be easy for the student to go ahead, run through that. And then I suppose if 7,000 records come back and you have to do that within a span of 4 months while finishing your master's, since it's a 1-year master's as well, some of the countries, they have 2 years, but within a year doing all that is quite intensive.
Yeah.
We're still talking about effectively the journal activity, the grey literature. We're not talking about the data that's embodied in those attributes, because that's another synthesis in its own right. Okay, how do you know that the numbers are what they say they are? Massive.
Any other question? Come on, yeah. Hi, I'm Erin. I'm a PhD student studying the psychometry department. My graduate degree on the what you're describing with your masters and some, it sounds like it was a lot of extra work for you to do this. I'm just wondering, how has it benefited you, and how has it influenced your career from taking out this method?
I suppose at the time it was very difficult, but once you get a hang of the literature, you can fly through screening almost but you just have to go and see what the key terms are. And I suppose covenants is very helpful in that because it highlights everything that you want in green, takes the red, that's a definite exclude, and you can put on filters. So that kind of made it easy. But I was very glad that I got that experience because I didn't even apply for a research assistant postdoctoral, but someone got to me from UCC, and they said that they saw my profile on LinkedIn and I had research experience with evidence synthesis and they're piloting something. So that was a paid opportunity that I got through that. And now I'm not flying, but like I feel like I'm doing okay with my PhD as well. The same area, the same methodology. So I suppose getting trained during the master's did help my PhD research smoothen it out a little bit. So yeah.
And did you have much peer support? I'm just wondering, because that's something that's come up today, is about having people with you that can support you. And how did you maybe negotiate, with other students who are also up to their neck in workload to become involved in your screening, etc.?
I actually had a student coming through the Viper internship. They were coming under a lane, and I had the opportunity to go through all the strategy and the screening with them, which was, again, a great opportunity to introduce it to someone and almost not like train, but essentially introduce them to it. And she actually got through it really well. So that was the only kind of help I had. Rest of it, I suppose it did kind of on your supervisor for a while to help me out with the screening because we didn't essentially do it for the master's, but when it comes to publication, a lot of it to the supervisor as the team or anyone else in the team or in the department who are already so busy with everything they have. So it is hard, but no one else could have helped me at that point, at least at a master's level, because everyone else is busy with their own projects. A lot of them were collecting data. I don't suppose anyone in my class in the Master's of Science was doing an evidence synthesis. Like, I think there were a batch of around 20 odd students. I was the only one teaming up evidence synthesis. So I suppose that was a bit different, but they couldn't help me at that time, no.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Hi, Jesse Waters on the Digital Learning Resources Library in the library. Just wondering, do you see generative AI tools as kind of an opportunity?
We knew this was
or is it more of a threat? Would that just add to the increased volume and reduce quality, or
Patty's eager to.
It's probably not generative. As the kind of the Wild West, it's coming much closer to databases in software like things like Elicit and Perplexity, right, where they're operating inside. There's a generative model somewhere in the bottom, but they're operating inside academic language and academic use. And that can only get better as the models are developed. But how much of the plant do you want to burn? But then, as you can see from Aline's, there's a life and there's a sense of pressure with volume and all that sort of thing. So the absolute need for the community processes, and then AI produces another level of uncertainty, because we really are in the domain of precision scholarship here, right? It has to be detailed and precise from day one. The protocol has to be an absolutely accurate rendition before you know what you're going to find. You know, it's almost impossible, right? So it's that precision. So when the AI tools can deliver precision, fine. But until then, they're a bit of a wrinkle in what's already a very difficult workload, but they will produce precision eventually. And if you look at the EPPI work over in London, where they built registers of vocabulary, which I use the Guards Policing, College of Policing is one of the organisations that taps into it. Suck and Trust taps into education. I use all these because they have registered vocabularies already. I use Eurovoc because that does the parallel language between all the different European languages. So you start out with the rabbit and all, you work your way across every language, all the 27. So it's things like it's precision in your language as well.
And transparency.
And then you have to have the transparency for the auditing and the quality and all of that sort of thing. So it really is taking what a research group could do and concentrating it into one or two scholars. And everybody is saying that the community thing. I absolutely love the mentoring, because that's how Cochrane built its absent power in the area. You know, Savvy 27 junior doctors doing night shift. tick, 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 scratch, 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 So they were able to add volume. Right? For most of your disciplines, you do not have volume. This is the problem.
Anyone else like to?
Yeah, I might follow up on that one. I remember I was involved in a project this couple of years ago now. It was 2018. It was definitely pre-COVID. And we were actually working on Covidence at the time. And Covidence contacted us and asked us if we'd be happy for a review to be a host review for them, for a trial that they were doing. And they were using a software called Robot Reviewer. And Robot Reviewer is you upload a PDF of the article, and this Robot Reviewer will extract the relevant information and the PICO criteria. So they wanted us to essentially be the extractor 1 and Robot Reviewer to be the extractor 2. And they were running a project to see the reliability of Robot Reviewer in extracting data relative to, say, the human, i.e. our review team. Actually don't know what the findings were. I'm not following but I do think, and absolutely kind of coming off of Patty's point as well, I do think AI, it's there. We can't ignore it. I think the problem with AI is that if people rely on it without the necessary expertise to be able to call it up on, that's problematic, that's not the correct way, that's not transparent. So AI can definitely support, but you still need the expertise. I don't think they can exist in isolation. I think it could possibly be a lovely marriage in that, as we would have said, like evidence synthesis takes a lot of time. And there might be opportunities where evidence synthesis can, well, the timelines at least, be, I suppose, streamlined a little bit more with support of AI. I know Covidence, for example, already within it, they've embedded some AI pieces. So they sort records as to most relevant. And they're learning from your screening pattern, and then they present the records they think are most relevant earlier on. So existing well-established and well-validated methods and softwares out there are kind of starting to embed them in. So I'm thinking, well, if they trust it, maybe we should. But I think the expertise piece has to be there.
I would agree because they have it in Vivo now as well. And it's just not very good. It's not nuanced. It sounds good. You can put in your codes, you can do loads of stuff with it and say, oh, can you generate a lovely descriptive theme? But you need the human process and
part of this code side of things, but it's not. And they do something crazy, the numbers.
That's it. So
they're normatizing this.
Yes.
So I just remember, sorry, Jessie, it's RAG is what the methods are, what the models are called. They follow the RAG method, whatever that one is, rather than the generative methods. So there's a difference in method there. But once, if they kind of just leave it at a spreadsheet numbers that you could make your own logic of it, they always carry too far.
How would PPI fit? They seem to be going in two separate directions.
Yeah, I suppose I was just thinking about that. Like, you'll never replace that human touch in use anyway. Like in research, I know Katie as head of ARC, they're doing great research in terms of PPI, that it's, like PPI is embedded from the very start. And that's essentially the idea of where evidence synthesis would move towards, that we're asking questions that the public want answers to, and that they can interpret the data themselves, give their feedback on it. Obviously, there's nuances within that too, and that can be challenging. It's not straightforward. But, AI obviously just cannot do that. And even in terms of, the findings, like our own clinical interpretation, like many of us are health professionals, we need to have that critical eye when we're interpreting something, that it's not often just the face value of what you find. There is more nuanced picture behind it. And, we do have, critical thinking skills that we need to employ. And so, I think we're safe enough from AI just yet. But it could be a partner, it could be a collaborator, it could be a tool.
In select areas as well. I think that's the key, because exactly as Sarah said, I cannot remove the human. And the importance of PPI is coming down the line, and we know this. But maybe some of the more mechanical pieces of evidence synthesis work, like, for example, as I said, they were trialing Robot Reviewer there to see its reliability. Maybe it could be when you're short of a second screener, it could be an opportunity to embed it. Covidence are embedding it in their smart system logic as well. So I think in very discrete ways, in very specific stages of a review project, maybe there's scope there. But like that, and as everyone has said, it's the expertise piece. It will never replace it in full. And I suppose it's a possible pitfall that students could fall into, thinking, this will write my whole review for me. It won't.
Oh, Alan, another question.
Yeah, can I ask about accessibility of the reviews? Because we live in a world where there's a lot of kickback against health research, kickback against science. The anti-vaccine thing. There's a whole list of things now where it's very difficult to get the truth. But one of the issues is that for us as researchers, we can read a systematic review and understand it. But how does the public do that? So how can the findings of systematic reviews be made more publicly accessible? What's happening there?
I know in terms of my own work with HICWA, for example, where they were doing a health technology assessment, which integrated a number of reviews for answering questions about newborn blood spot screening. And they provided an entirely patient-facing document regarding that. And I think Cochrane had lots of advice in terms of trying to have that, patient information type summary. I suppose the high-level summary that will break down things in easier forms. But I suppose what I've seen more recently as well is people are using things like infographics, videos, even like little animations. One of our colleagues in the University of Galway, Ayla Quinn, she's doing amazing work in the area of actually having the public involved in asking a few questions that they've chosen from the get-go. And I've seen some of her preliminary, what she has been doing in terms of even just explaining what a systematic review is to the public. And she's used things like videos, graphics. And I think you're right, we do need to try and translate this excellent knowledge into a more easily discernible, easily understood, actually digestible form of information. Yeah. And I suppose sometimes with research, it can feel like it just ends when you publish the paper and you get that, paid your journal fee or whatever. You get that email, you post it on LinkedIn, which, hardly any of the public are actually going to go to LinkedIn for that information. And then that's kind of it. I probably do need to do a better job of that. Even, here in UL, I suppose, there are some patient facing, cafes where we talk about our research and things like that. But we probably need to strive towards that because it's a bit of a pity that it's getting integrated in the healthcare system in ways or different levels of services. But patients don't really see that, and it's so integral to developing their trust in those systems as well, to know that it's evidence informed. So I think a long way to go on that.
But the PPI is that's a task that PPI groups can do. I mean, Katie could speak to this better than I can. In my PhD, in the end, I got H1B gave the limited dissemination money, and I did an animation with my study was on with children in school who have language problems, and they met me and the designer, and they kind of designed the animation, if you like. Now, the structure wasn't, you have to let go to some extent because it wasn't quite what that's the tension, with PPI, if you're honest, that you have to let go. Katie, have you anything else to add around the studying to dissemination piece?
No, I think Sarah did a great description there. Just returning to the earlier pointer and AI, it's obviously where lots of people's focus is at all. I think just, in terms of supervising students, I think it's a really tricky time in that we don't have clear guidance. People are using it willy-nilly across the board at all stages of the evidence synthesis process, including generating the themes in qualitative evidence synthesis, creating tables. I myself you mentioned robot review. I have my own, trademark it, my own prompt that I have created for ChatGPT for doing data extraction on papers. And I just use it to help me deal with all the messy formatting. You're copying and pasting things out of a PDF, trying to put them into some of the, and then the formatting's all going wild. So I do it myself, human data extraction, and that just use that to help me tidy up formatting. So I think there are tons of ways we can expedite the review process and take some of the tediousness out of it. And using AI, and I'm sure that in 5 years' time, we will all be embedded practices and this is bad. But I think this is a particularly difficult time and really vulnerable. We got feedback on a paper recently from a peer reviewer, and criticised our use of AI in our search syntax. Actually, the student said if I had used AI, I wouldn't have had the errors in it. We had a bit of bracket proliferation. But, I think ways in which it's being used and asking AI to give us feedback maybe on things that we're doing or search strategies as well as academic peer review. I think there are lots of positives, but right now it's like the Wild West. And I think that's just a wild little space to be.
We put my arts and humanities hat on. We have School of Journalism, right? So when you have issues, we have young journalists on campus learning their trade. Relatively few of them go into science journalism. Okay. We need to get them there, right? Because they're the folks who know how to promote, right? How to be accurate, how to be precise, and how to promote. But if we have educational technologists on campus, they're ones who will go to teach to multiple intelligences, right? It's not just experts. It's all of us on the support side.
Thank you. We have
one more.
About 6 minutes left. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Daniel Claudino, and I am project coordinator in the research center here, the Center for Implementation Research. And I just want to give an information going back to the micro-credentials available to students. We are currently preparing a micro-credential in Introduction to Implementation Science to be launched, hopefully to be accredited, hopefully for next semester. So there's this information. And of course, evidence is a basic ARMA implementation science. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Yeah, and I think that kind of speaks to there actually are so many great things happening across the university between, Pauline's evidence synthesis work, Katie's PPI work, the work in the library, and often we aren't kind of bridging those gaps, even though we're all working in similar areas. So actually, this has been fantastic to get to know who's working in the area, and if you do want to, if you are interested in maybe building a community in this area, like we all have very open ears, we really do want to move forward with something like that. So yeah, thanks so much for that.
Thank you. Would I just stretch the panel into 3 keynote messages to take away from the audience?
One of my last slides that I actually skipped over was that it's a community effort. So I think evidence synthesis, it has so many parts to it, but there's so much knowledge either internally or externally. And none of us have ever done evidence synthesis enough, just doesn't work like that. So yeah, that would be my
That's what one. Any others to add?
I would just say, I suppose, if you're completely new to the process, just to look at what's out there already, and that might just be going on to websites like Prospero, the Open Science Framework. Just look at how they're put together. Just do different test searches. Just beginning there. That's the only way to see in different parts of the review. And particularly, unfortunately, a lot of them don't provide their search strategies, which is a real pain, you know what I mean? If they do, sometimes then they're not great.
So he has a tendency village, don't reinvent the wheel, as in tap into all these amazing organisational opportunities and mechanisms that Sarah showed. One more?
Yeah, phenomenal skill for your future career. Ernst & Young, PricewaterhouseCoopers, they all do in-house now because it's fundamental. So anybody going into the policy side of the evaluation side or the what work side where public money is spent, is it spent wisely? It's all there.
So the pain is worth it. Free take homes. Thanks so much, everybody. And thanks to the audience for your great questions. I'll come back to you to other closing remarks or just to close
Thanks. Just thank you all for coming along and interesting and great if somebody can come and make contact with us if you're interested in working and collaborating in this space as well. Thanks again.